It's not the imposter syndrome, it's the imposter stage. And we all go through it as we transition in our lives. It frustrates me that we've actually created a syndrome out of something really normal because it makes it sound like we should be avoiding it or that it's uncomfortable and that we might have shame around it. I talk about the imposter syndrome because I have experienced it multiple times and I've been learning to make peace with that part of the transition in life. 5 years ago, I was working in the corporate sector. I was one of those worker bees, spending 10, sometimes 12 hours a day in the office under neon lighting. Neon lighting? If that's, it wasn't green, it was just, that dreadful white light that just keeps you up at night. Um, that was my life. But I knew deep down that there was a yearning for something deeper and more fulfilling. It felt so strong that I was living an inauthentic life. You just feel it in your body, right? This sense of inauthenticity. It's this quiet discomfort. Anxiety is a beautiful feeling because it's pointing to some disharmony. There's some discordance between the outer world and your inner world. So it's a gift. It's pointing you towards something. And I was feeling anxious. I was feeling inauthentic. But that's the only life I knew. Throughout my 20s, I was working hard in the corporate world. But I quit and I decided to start a business, which was a long-held dream of mine. And for the longest time, I felt so inauthentic and an imposter, calling myself an entrepreneur. What does it mean to be an entrepreneur? I didn't feel like one. I had an online shop selling vegan sports nutrition, but behind the scenes, that was just me using the spare room, my family home, because I moved back in with my mum, packing orders and doing things. And I certainly didn't feel like Steve Jobs or Mark Zuckerberg. So I felt like an imposter. And then I left that behind. And then I ended up in Melbourne working in a startup. And again, I felt like an imposter. I was doing a job I didn't feel qualified for. I started working with hypnotherapists and writing hypnotherapy scripts and working in meditation, and I felt like an imposter. And then most recently, in the last year, teaching meditation and opening a meditation center and running events. At every stage of my growth, I felt like an imposter. And it's because it's part of the journey, right? At a certain point, you have to take a leap. And your knowledge, your understanding is so far behind the reality of what you're leaping into. If you knew what you were getting yourself into, you probably wouldn't take that leap. And so then when you're in this new environment, you're in this new setting, it doesn't feel right. You're out of your comfort zone. But what I've learned is fear. It's almost like it's these old parts of you trying to hold on. There's this desperate attempt to revert back to what is safe, what is understood, what is predictable. And that's how we end up stuck in our lives. It doesn't matter that we're unfulfilled, that we're feeling anxious, feeling alone, whatever it might be. We might think we want to leave that lifestyle behind, but in reality, those are the emotional states that feel most comfortable to us. Anything else can feel destabilizing. And I say this having grown up in my teenage years, feeling this deep sense of loneliness. Desperately not wanting to be lonely, but having this heavy feeling weighing down on every single day. The gravity pulling you towards depression. And then in my 20s, as I started to open up and come out of that gloomy period, so much evidence to the contrary, so much evidence that I was surrounding myself with beautiful people, amazing connections, feeling seen, feeling joy, but this pulling towards loneliness because it's familiar. This drive towards avoidance, stepping away from deep, meaningful connection. That whole anxious avoidant pattern that's so familiar to so many of us. Why would we do that? Why would we get ourselves into situations where we're avoiding people or we're feeling really insecure? We're stirring up all of this energy. We're suppressing it. We actually feel comfortable in those states. They're familiar. They are echoes of our parenting, of our family, of our earliest relationships. Sometimes it feels as if the universe just presents these opportunities for you to finally recognize and break the pattern. And when you start breaking these patterns, it's going to feel really unnatural. Because you're doing different things, you're behaving in different ways. I remember a few years ago, I decided to start being more open in my appreciation, my gratitude towards friends. And I would send out some messages, how much they meant to me. Because I realized I'd never really communicated that. It was just assumed. And sharing that felt so vulnerable. Like releasing it out and then having this this feeling of really almost associated with this feeling of a cringe, like that internal oh. And then you'd think, when I got a response that was so loving and returning the gratitude, that it would flush my body with all this beautiful love. But no, it just intensified this knot. And sometimes I couldn't read the message or even respond to it. That's how unfamiliar that feeling was. So much more used to loneliness, to avoidance. And it makes sense. These old parts of us wanting to keep us safe, to keep us in the patterns that are familiar. Yeah, they're destructive. Yeah, we might not like them, but hey, stability. We love that. We love knowing that projecting into the future, a year from now, things are going to be pretty consistent with how they are. We see that mapped out in politics. We see that mapped out in the careers we choose. A good job, in the minds of our parents, is a stable job. Become a doctor or a lawyer. These professions that have existed for millennia. So when we start testing the boundaries, when we start experimenting and discovering our truth, our authenticity, it feels unnatural. You feel exposed. You know, running these meditation events, when I first started them, I was like, who am I? Who am I to teach meditation? Are they going to trust me? They're going to see through me? What about all my flaws? Of which I have so many, and that I talk fairly openly about now as well. If I had allowed myself to fall into the trap of the imposter syndrome, I wouldn't have stepped into my fear, and I wouldn't have kept walking. And as a result of that, this year, there's just been this beautiful unfolding for me. You know, Joseph Campbell says, the treasure you seek is in the cave you fear the most. And it's true. Fear points towards our deepest desires. There's a lot of fear there. What if it became true? What would that mean for our identity? If there's a dream within you of being a musician, of starting a business, of having a beautiful relationship, whatever it might be, what if it comes true? What if it completely transforms your life and you look around yourself and you don't recognize it anymore? That's so scary for the nervous system. And the flip side of that, what if it doesn't come true? What if this dream, this fantasy that you keep coming back to, wow, what if it turns out you can't do it? If that wasn't meant for you? Well, now you've lost this self-soothing, self-regulating fantasy. The thing you can come back to over and over again is this possibility, this dream. I understand. I do. And if you're anything like me, you're feeling this urge to be authentic in your life, to have alignment between your values, to know what your values are, to know what your wants, your needs, your boundaries are, and to create a life that fits, that feels comfortable, that feels nourishing. And as you move into that, you may feel like an imposter, but it is just a stage. It's a beautiful stage to go through. Because when you're experiencing uncertainty, well, on the other side of uncertainty and confusion is clarity. You have to go through it. So I hope that's been helpful for you. I never know where these videos will go, really. That's part of the magic of them. But I've enjoyed speaking to you. If you've enjoyed this video, please do leave a comment. Please follow, like. Please do some breathing. Some nice deep breathing would be nice. Take a moment to do that. And have a lovely day.